Welcome back to Crit and Crit. I am Axion.
I'm Scint.
And we are continuing our way through Castlevania Circle of the Moon and our discussion of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
So we mentioned this a little bit last episode, but this is what we would call, in the biz, a frame novel. A story that is set in the frame of a certain conceit. It's not at all uncommon. Dracula, as mentioned, is epistolary, so it's all in flashback through the frame of this is a series of diaries and letters and newspaper articles that have been compiled into a sort of found footage collection, Captain's Log Aftermath. Another such example would be Frankenstein, which begins with Robert Walton's letters to his sister, and then is a flashback within the frame of those letters, as Victor tells Walton his story, and Walton presumably is writing all of this down. I imagine his hand is falling off, because it's not a short book. But the one that is best known to me is also a bit of personal embarrassment, which I'll get to. So, when I was about 8, my parents showed me The Princess Bride for the first time. And now, for those not familiar, The Princess Bride is itself a frame story of a grandpa telling a story to his sick grandson, who doesn't want to hear the story because he thinks it's a kissing book. We gotta skip over all the romance parts. So, being the nerd that I have been my entire life, it wasn't too long after this that I decided, oh, the movie says it's based on a book. I want to go read the book. So I went to the library and they let me check out the book. And it was okay. It was very different from the movie, but I didn't hate it. But now, the book mentions explicitly that it's the good bits. It's cut from a novel by S. Morgenstern. And here's what I've cut out, notes from the author. So, being a child, I was not really familiar with the concept of a frame novel. I didn't know this was an authorial conceit to tell the story and say, I'm leaving out these things. So, I go back to the library and ask about The Princess Bride. Well, it seems like you had that checked out to you already. No, I want the other one. What other one? The full version, because this one says it has stuff cut out. And the librarian looked at me for a long moment, finally realized what I was asking, and started laughing. Yeah, that's how I learned about frame novels.
If I recall from the first time you told me this story, she was laughing and you were sitting there indignantly wondering what was so funny.
Yeah, because she didn't explain first. She just was like, oh, that's adorable, and started laughing because, like we do when the dog does something cute and she doesn't understand why we're laughing. So, yeah.
She's gonna hear you.
Well, probably she's right on the floor. So yeah, the premise of a frame novel is generally going to be to set up a certain tone, contrast, setting, or expectation. With Frankenstein, it's kind of set up Walton and Frankenstein as foils, and I'm sure we'll get into that more one day, because there's probably no way we're not going to eventually cover Frankenstein. It's too classic to ignore forever.
Oh, I figured it was going to be on the list eventually.
Yeah. So with Princess Bride, we want to skip over some of the boring stuff, and our excuse is we're telling that to a small child with no attention span, and we have to keep his interest, so we're going to cut out anything that doesn't progress what we want to progress. With Dracula, the epistolary format lets us take the form of multiple narrators while not really having a narrator. Everything except like the newspaper articles that are said to be put into like Mina's or Seward's diaries is written in first person. This means that we actually get the specific voice of every viewpoint character. We get a lot of Harker's personality, we get a lot of Mina's personality, Lucy's, Seward's, and Van Helsing's. Those are the ones that mainly have, I think there's maybe one or two characters that have something in there that I didn't mention, but those are the characters we spend the most time with, and we get to know the best through their limited narration. Now, the bulk of it would be Harker, Seward, and Mina's writing, just because of what they've seen and how Mina is compiling everything. But we do get a little bit from Van Helsing, though not as much because he's mostly brought in as the guy we all listen to, and it wouldn't be as interesting if he gave us all the answers right away on the page. So this is also a way to withhold information. If you have a certain frame, it also limits the amount of information your characters can have and therefore give to the audience, which can help you set up your pacing and your reveals and your suspense a little bit better to get that right emotional tone to make sure your audience maintains interest the way you want them to throughout.
So, we have these 3+ different storytellers. I need to find a save point before I find that boss. Maybe there's one down here. So I guess the obvious question at this point is, how are each of these narrators slightly different from one another? Aha, here it is. So, the story starts with Harker. Let's start with Harker. Hello?
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
I thought I was prompting you.
Okay, I can go ahead then. I always worry I'm taking these over because it's mostly your gameplay and me talking.
Yeah, that's fine.
Alright, so, Harker. First character we see, honestly, pretty naive. He's honestly more interested in getting the recipe for this local dish so Mina can learn how to cook it when he gets home than the fact that all of the locals are crossing themselves when he mentions the person he's going to go visit and giving him crucifixes and talking about all these superstitions. As mentioned in our recap, Dracula is the most suspicious person on the face of the earth, and he's mostly just like, what a strange gentleman. He's very polite, though, and doesn't really notice that he's in active danger until he notices that, oh, I've been locked in with these crazy women who want to eat me. And I think he might have just promised me to them when he's done with me. Oh, no. Then has to try and figure out an escape. But he does note down these oddities, so he is at least a little bit observant. He is the key to realizing where Dracula is, because he realizes, oh wait, that's the house I sold him, when they start putting together all this information. And we do know that he is completely and utterly devoted to Mina. He at one point even notes that if they fail to stop Dracula, he will become a vampire too, so Mina doesn't have to suffer alone. Which is morbidly sweet. So yeah, you get a pretty good feel for his character through the narration. That's just entirely through how he phrases things. He takes special attention to dote on Mina whenever he can, and talk about how happy he is to see her again, and how much he needs to see her when he's away from her, and how worried he is after she's bitten by Dracula, etc., etc.
Looks like the rose whip is the better whip.
I mean, anyone who's watched Yu Yu Hakusho could have told you that.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that show in years. So next we have, I'm going to say Lucy next, just because there's not as much to say with her. Her diary mostly centers around her relationships. How happy she is to be marrying Arthur, how excited she is for it, and talking about the flowers that Van Helsing leaves for her, and worrying about her mother, finding her mother's body the night she dies. So yeah, we basically just get the feel that Lucy's a little bit sheltered, but she's just...
She means well.
Yeah, she means well, but, like, let's be fair. vampires are not super well known at this time as of Dracula, so it makes sense that she wouldn't necessarily know as much. Mina. Good Lord, Mina. Mina is established in her narration as very practical, but also something of a romantic. She is very, very devoted to Jonathan, very excited to marry him, wants to help him in his career, and understandably distraught when she discovers he's ill, and eagerly rushes off to him, and in her letters to Lucy is extremely excited to have finally gotten to marry him and be there with him, and so on and so forth. She's very good at noting down details and organizing information, even within the scope of her own journal, let alone just as a character. So yeah, let's just say, without Mina, you truly have a horror novel that ends horribly forever.
Yep. Mina is the most competent person in the cast.
Yes.
With the possible exception of Van Helsing. And even then it would just be a tie rather than Mina being the winner. Without Mina, I have to agree, the main cast would not stand a chance.
Yep. Seward, a little bit of wallowing in his journal. Most of it is pretty focused on his observations of his patient and his own biases regarding that situation. Yeah, he's just kind of there, honestly. I don't find him as interesting as the other characters.
He really is not very compelling, honestly. He fills a niche. He gives the main cast a reason to have access to Renfield, and
Van Helsing, really.
Yeah. And he what's the word I'm looking for?
He's the guy who knows a guy. Let's just say that's his role.
Yeah.
And there is a fair bit of mooning over Lucy and lamenting the fact that she chose Arthur instead.
As you do. Which is really weird, because it, at least in my hindsight, because it feels like Stoker started writing some kind of love triangle subplot, and then decided he didn't want to do that, and just had Lucy pick one of the Jets, and politely decline the other two, and just the plot went nowhere.
I guess, though all of them do agree that they want to be friends with her, because, you know, this is before the friend zone is established as a thing to be at all costs, and don't get me started.
No, yeah.
We can talk about that more with characters, I think, but... Or, honestly, one of the other topics we had listed would probably be better for that. And, do you want to just talk about the rest of the characters while we're in this episode?
I was about to say, we've kind of drifted into the character conversation anyway, so we can probably move, when we finish, to the non-perspective characters.
Okay. I think the only other narrator would be Van Helsing.
Yep. So Van Helsing is the expert. He is the guy who knows everything that needs to be known about the current situation. He knows all the things the other characters don't know. He is the exposition guy who comes in and tells everybody else all the stuff they don't know. All the stuff that keeps the plot moving.
Yep. He has to be the one to basically explain to Arthur, yes, we do have to open your fiancé's grave and cut off her head and drive a stake through her heart. Yes, I know, it's like killing her a second time, and this is really hard for you, but it's really important, and we kind of want your permission first just so it doesn't feel like it's worse than it has to be. But, yeah. He's also notably, not English compared to the rest of the cast, except for Quincy. He's actually written as having a slightly off grammar to show that he is foreign.
Yep, I believe as you said earlier, the story says that he is Dutch, and if I recall correctly, he just happened to be visiting in Britain when this all went down, which basically... No,
Seward knew him from something else and wrote to him and say, hey, this is curious, can you come look?
Okay, so he did come from from wherever he was before, either his home country or wherever else he happened to have been.
Yeah, like I said, Seward's role is I know a guy. He just happens to know the connection to Dracula and the guy who can kill him. Alright, so Dracula himself is probably the one we want to talk about as far as major characters go that don't have a narration.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think we've done basically everybody except for Dracula and maybe Renfield, and there's not really a lot to say. Oh, well, yeah.
But yeah, like, Dracula's got the bigger role, and we'll do Quincy next.
Yep. So Dracula... where to begin with Dracula? He's obviously the nominal antagonist.
He also is known to dig through the ditches and burn through the witches.
No, that's Dracula.
Close enough!
Anyway, he is feared and respected in his home country. He is a man of wealth and taste.
Oh, sure, yell at me for mine.
I didn't yell at you, I just corrected you. But doesn't Harker describe him as a devil on multiple occasions?
He describes him as a lot of things, so we can go with that.
I'm pretty sure at least once he's specifically says a devil, but anyway, point being...
yeah, that's fair. Anyway, yeah.
It is not an unapt comparison.
But yeah, Dracula also seems to have been planning this for quite some time, because as we discover, he has at least 2 places in England where he can run to. Had also planned several other hiding spots that the party had to go find and ruin for him to make sure they could flush him out. He very much wanted to avoid standing out in any way, which is why he was trying to learn as much about English mannerisms and speech patterns as he could from Harker, so that when he got there, because remember, xenophobia kind of fueled this, so standing out would have been very, very bad. He knew that. So he had years to plan this, years to gather the money to pull this off, and he did everything he could to make sure he would be as undetectable as possible. It's sheer chance that the right people got together to discover what he had planned. If Harker hadn't escaped, and if Mina hadn't happened to mention he was having problems to Van Helsing, and then compiled on the information, they never would have been able to figure it out. It's basically just the fact that Harker was able to escape was the fatal mistake for him. So we can probably put some arrogance in there, because he definitely knows that he's basically untouchable. Unless you're Van Helsing and happen to know all this weird folklore.
Saved once again by knowledge.
Yep. Quincy Morris. The Texas cowboy who's in love with Lucy Westenra. Brave, pretty solid guy. Pretty upstanding person. That's about it.
Yep. In some ways, kind of the stereotype of what Americans were seen like as at the time.
I'll say, there are far less flattering ways to have your country depicted.
Yep.
Renfield. As mentioned, zoophagous inmate at Seward's Asylum. Eats animals. Seems to have a weird connection to Dracula. He actually dies, I believe, or at least is I don't remember if he dies or is just severely injured, trying to stop Dracula from going after Mina once he figures out what's happening, because Mina was nice to him that one time that she met him. which, something else to note on Mia's character. She is the social glue of the party. Everybody wants to save her, not just because we want to stop Dracula, but because we don't know what we'd do without her. We love her.
Yep, kind of like Lucy, just more competent and less...
More platonic.
Yeah, and less romantic and made of saccharin.
Yeah, I believe Van Helsing describes her as having the mind of a man and the heart of a woman. She's incredibly smart, but she's also much more sensitive than they are, because we are manly men in the Victorian era. We don't do these feelings except for mourning, then it's acceptable. It's like, dude, you can cry, okay? There's stuff going down. But we can get into that later.
Yep. Again, very of its time.
Yep. Yeah, I think those are the major characters.
That's really all of it I'm remembering at the moment, unless I slipped up and forgot someone like I did Morris again.
Oh, we forgot about Arthur, but there's not much to say with him. He's just the noble suitor. And by noble, I mean he's nobility.
Yep, he's the least memorable of Lucy's paramours, to be honest. I'd completely forgotten about him, and I don't think he has a huge part in the plot.
I mean, he's there for most of it and kind of helps gather information because he's rich enough to have connections to places so they can find things. But, yeah. As far as, like, the out in the field, once Lucy is staked, he's less active because he's got to take over family stuff.
I'm having a lot of trouble with the bombs today.
Well, but yeah, I'm not really sure what else to add here, so probably a good place to call it?
Yep, I think so.
Alright, until next time.
See y'all then.
Bye.